February 27, 1945. The bitter morning air carried the acrid smoke of burning villages across the Rhineland-Westphalia countryside in the German farming village of Elsdorf. The earth trembled beneath 57 tons of Krupp steel as Panzer Kampfwagen 6 Tiger No. 201 prowled through rubble-strewn streets. Its commander, Oberfeldwebel Heinrich Müller, peered through his periscope at the American columns advancing in the distance. Watching the familiar silhouettes of M4 Sherman tanks grinding forward through the mud, Müller had seen those shapes countless times before. The angular hulls, the stubby 75mm guns, the thin armor that his Tiger's 88mm cannon could pierce like paper at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. He turned to his gunner with a knowing smirk. "More Tommy Cookers," he muttered, using the derisive nickname German tankers had coined for the American Sherman. The name had spread through the Wehrmacht like wildfire, a cruel reference to the British field stove, suggesting that American tanks burned as reliably as a soldier's cooking fire. What Oberfeldwebel Müller could not see through his narrow vision blocks was the future rolling toward him, hidden in the morning mist. A new shape moved among the familiar Shermans, longer, heavier, mounting a cannon that would shatter every assumption the Wehrmacht had built about American armor. The thunder approaching Elsdorf carried more than the rumble of conventional tanks. It carried the sound of American industrial supremacy finally unleashed in steel. The German panzer forces had dominated European battlefields for 4 years by 1945. Their reputation forged in the furnaces of Poland, France, and the Eastern Front since 1941. German tank design had evolved into an arms race with the Red Army, producing increasingly powerful machines like the Panther and Tiger that could engage enemy armor at distances their opponents could only dream of reaching. German tankers had developed not just tactical superiority, but psychological dominance. The unshakable confidence that came from knowing their weapons outclassed anything they allies could field. This supremacy had bred contempt, particularly toward American armor. German after-action reports consistently dismissed Sherman tanks as inferior machines, suitable only for infantry support rather than tank versus tank combat. The numbers seemed to support their derision. A Tiger I could penetrate a Sherman's frontal armor at 2,000 meters while remaining invulnerable to the Sherman's 75mm gun at all, but point-blank range. German training manuals described American tanks as quantity over quality, mass-produced machines designed for factory efficiency rather than battlefield effectiveness. The mockery extended beyond technical specifications into cultural disdain. German propaganda portrayed American manufacturing as soulless assembly line production, contrasting it with Germanic craftsmanship and engineering precision. Tank crews shared stories of American Shermans brewing up, catching fire after single hits, their gasoline engines and inadequate armor protection making them easy prey for experienced panzer crews. The nickname Tommy Cooker became so pervasive that even German infantry used it, confident that any encounter with American armor would end in their favor. Yet this contempt masked a fundamental misunderstanding of American strategic thinking. While German engineers pursued individual tank superiority, American planners focused on logistics, reliability, and mass production. They understood that wars were won not by perfect machines, but by thousands of adequate machines, supported by an industrial base that could replace losses faster than the enemy could inflict them. The Sherman tank, for all its perceived weaknesses, embodied this philosophy, a machine designed to be shipped across oceans, maintained by conscript mechanics, and operated by crews with minimal training. But even the Americans recognized the Sherman's limitations. By late 1944, reports from Normandy and the subsequent fighting in France had made clear that German armor held qualitative superiority in direct engagements. The battle of the bulge in December 1944 had driven this point home with brutal clarity. As Panther and Tiger tanks devastated American armored formations in the Ardennes forests, something had to change if American forces were to break through the fortified positions along the Rhine and drive into the heart of Germany. Answer had been years in development: the T-26E3, soon to be renamed the M26 Pershing, weighing 46 tons and mounting a 90mm cannon derived from American anti-aircraft guns. The Pershing represented America's acknowledgement that tank warfare had evolved beyond the Sherman's capabilities. Its 4 inches of frontal armor equaled that of a Tiger I, while its high-velocity 90mm gun could penetrate any German tank's armor at combat ranges. 90mm gun M3 was indeed a formidable weapon, developed from the successful 90mm anti-aircraft gun that had protected American cities and military installations throughout the war. It fired a 24-pound armor-piercing projectile at nearly 2,700 feet per second in testing. This combination could penetrate 162 millimeters of rolled, homogeneous armor at 90 degrees, more than enough to defeat the frontal armor of any German tank except the heaviest. Tiger II variants at extreme angles. More importantly, the 90mm gun represented American industrial capability at its peak, while German factories struggled with material shortages and Allied bombing. American production lines turned out ammunition, spare parts, and replacement barrels in quantities that German planners could barely comprehend. Each Pershing that reached the front lines carried not just superior firepower, but the implicit promise of American industrial might, the guarantee that whatever was lost could be replaced. Whatever was damaged could be repaired. The first 20 T-26E3 tanks arrived in Europe as part of the secretive Zebra mission in February 1945. Army officials, still uncertain about the new tank's battlefield performance, insisted on field testing before full deployment. The machines were distributed to the most experienced crews in the First Army's armored division's men who had fought their way across France and Belgium in Shermans, learning firsthand the limitations of American Armor Sergeant Nicholas Mashlonik of the 3rd Armored Division was one of these chosen few. A veteran tank commander with 14 confirmed kills since Normandy, Mashlonik had earned his reputation fighting German armor in his trusty Sherman. When orders came to turn in his proven machine for an experimental T-26E3, he approached the new tank with the skepticism of a soldier who had learned not to trust untested equipment. But as Mashlonik familiarized himself with T-26E3 number 40, he began to appreciate what American engineers had achieved. The tank's controls felt familiar, similar enough to a Sherman. That transition required minimal training, but everything was larger, heavier, more substantial. The 90mm gun dominated the turret, its massive breech and loading mechanism dwarfing the Sherman's 75mm cannon. When Mashlonik test-fired the weapon, the concussion and muzzle blast demonstrated power unlike anything he had experienced in American armor. The psychological impact on American crews was immediate and profound. For 3 years, Sherman crews had gone into battle knowing they were outgunned, relying on superior numbers, tactical coordination, and mechanical reliability to overcome German technical advantages. The Pershing offered something different: the confidence that came from fielding superior weapons. American tankers finally had a machine that could meet German armor on equal terms, that could penetrate enemy tanks at the same ranges where German guns could kill them. This transformation in American capability was invisible to German forces preparing their defenses. Along the Rhine, intelligence reports continued to describe American armored units equipped with standard Sherman tanks, supported by the occasional tank destroyer mounting a 76mm gun. German commanders planned their defensive positions based on these assessments. positioning their limited armor reserves to maximize the range advantages their guns provided over American weapons. The Tiger crew, commanded by Oberfeldwebel Müller, exemplified this confidence, positioned in Elsdorf with 2 other Tigers and several Panzer IVs. They represented the last reserve of the 53rd Army Corps. Their mission was simple: delay the American advance long enough for German engineers to prepare demolitions along the Rhine, denying the Allies intact bridges that might speed their crossing into Germany proper. Müller's crew had fought together since the Normandy campaign, surviving encounters that had claimed dozens of other German tanks. They had learned to use their Tigers' advantages: superior range, heavier armor, and more powerful gun to engage American formations from positions where return fire was ineffective. The tactic had worked perfectly throughout the summer and autumn of 1944, allowing individual German tanks to destroy multiple American vehicles before withdrawing to new positions. Morning of February 27th seemed to offer another routine engagement. American reconnaissance had spotted the German positions the previous evening, and Müller's crew had prepared their tank accordingly. They had selected a hull-down position that concealed most of their vehicle while allowing the 88mm gun to cover the approaches to the village. Their ammunition loadout included a mix of armor-piercing and high-explosive shells, the former for enemy tanks, the latter for infantry and soft-skinned vehicles. As dawn broke over Elsdorf, the familiar sound of Sherman engines echoed across the frozen fields. Müller's crew took their positions with practiced efficiency, driver ready at his controls, gunner tracking targets through his telescopic sight, loader standing by with a massive 88mm shell cradled in his arms. The routine was unchanged from dozens of previous encounters. Identify the American tanks, engage at maximum range, destroy or disable the leading vehicles, force the survivors to withdraw or seek cover that would limit their effectiveness. This morning brought something unprecedented. As Müller scanned the approaching American formation through his commander's periscope, he noticed one tank that differed from the familiar Sherman silhouette: longer, lower, with a gun that seemed disproportionately large for its turret. This vehicle moved with the same mechanical confidence as the Shermans, but its profile suggested capabilities that no American tank had previously possessed. 26E3 No. 40 approached Elsdorf carrying 42 rounds of 90mm ammunition and a crew that understood they were testing more than a new tank. They were validating American industrial capability, proving that the United States could produce weapons to match or exceed German engineering. For Sergeant Maschlonek, the morning represented both opportunity and risk, the chance to demonstrate the Pershing's capabilities, balanced against the knowledge that failure might cost not just his life, but confidence in American armored development. Engagement began with familiar patterns. Müller's Tiger crew spotted the American formation at 1,200 meters, well within the effective range of their 88mm gun, but beyond the reach of standard Sherman weapons. The German gunner acquired his target, the leading Sherman, and prepared to fire at this range. The 88mm armor-piercing shell would penetrate the American tank's frontal armor with energy to spare, likely igniting the ammunition storage and creating the spectacular fire that had earned Shermans their derisive nickname. The first shot struck true, the Sherman erupting in flames that silhouetted the entire American formation. Müller's crew reloaded with practiced speed, preparing to engage the next target. But as the gunner swung his sight to acquire another Sherman, he found something unexpected in his crosshairs: the strange, long-barreled tank that had puzzled Müller during his initial reconnaissance. Maschinal had observed the Tiger's first shot and immediately identified the German position, unlike previous encounters, where his Sherman's 75mm gun would have been ineffective at such range. The Pershing's 90mm cannon offered genuine striking power. He ordered his driver to position the tank for a clear shot while remaining in the valley's concealment, then took over as gunner to ensure accuracy for this critical engagement. The T-30 high-velocity, armor-piercing shell that left the Pershing's gun barrel that morning carried more than explosive power. It represented the culmination of American industrial development, the product of factories that had learned to mass-produce precision weapons while maintaining quality standards that German facilities, battered by Allied bombing and starved of raw materials, could no longer match. The shell's impact on the Tiger's lower hull delivered a message that reverberated through German armored doctrine. American weapons technology had achieved parity. The Tiger's transmission and drive assembly, struck by the 90mm projectile, suffered catastrophic damage that immobilized the massive tank instantly before the German crew could react. Maschlonik's second shot penetrated the gun mantlet and ricocheted into the fighting compartment, igniting ammunition storage and filling the hull with fire. The legendary Tiger, I symbol of German armored supremacy, had been destroyed by a single American tank firing from 1,000 meters. But the psychological impact extended far beyond the destruction of one German tank across the Rhineland. Other T-26E3 South were engaging German armor with similar results. The mathematical certainty that had governed tank combat for 4 years, German guns outranging and overpowering American weapons, had suddenly shifted. German tank crews found themselves facing opponents who could penetrate their armor at the same ranges where they could inflict damage in return. The transformation was most dramatically illustrated during the advance on Cologne in early March 1945. As American forces approached Germany's fourth-largest city, they encountered defensive positions that German commanders had prepared based on assumptions about American armored capabilities. Panther and Tiger tanks had been positioned to take advantage of their range superiority over Sherman guns, placed where they could engage advancing Americans at distances that would allow multiple shots before return fire. Became effective Corporal Clarence Smoyer, gunner and Staff Sergeant Robert Early's Pershing experienced this shift firsthand during the fighting in Blatzheim, when German 88mm anti-tank guns opened fire from concealed positions near the village. Smoyer found himself able to return fire with white phosphorus shells that set the enemy positions ablaze. The tactic would have been impossible with a Sherman 75mm gun, which lacked both the range and destructive power to effectively engage dug-in anti-tank positions. Culminating moment came during the famous tank duel at Cologne Cathedral on March 6, 1945. As Early's Pershing approached the historic church, Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelborth's Panther emerged from concealment to block the American advance. The Panther represented the pinnacle of German tank development, a machine that combined the firepower of a Tiger with improved mobility and more efficient production requirements. But when Smoyer acquired the Panther in his gun sight, the engagement followed new rules. The 90mm gun's armor-piercing shell struck the German tank's side armor at 300 yards, penetrating easily and igniting the engine compartment. 2 additional shots finished the Panther, each penetration demonstrating the 90mm gun's ability to defeat German armor that had previously been considered invulnerable to American weapons. The ammunition that fed these victories represented American industrial superiority as much as technological advancement, while German factories struggled to maintain quality control under constant Allied bombardment. American production lines delivered 90mm shells with consistent ballistic properties and reliable fusing. German tank crews increasingly fought with ammunition of variable quality, sometimes finding that armor-piercing shells failed to penetrate targets they should have defeated easily. The symbolic power of these engagements extended beyond their tactical significance. For 3 years, German propaganda had portrayed American military equipment as inferior products of soulless mass production, contrasting Germanic craftsmanship with assembly line mediocrity. The Pershing success challenged this narrative at its foundation, demonstrating that American industry could produce weapons that matched or exceeded German engineering while maintaining the reliability and mechanical simplicity that allowed rapid crew training and field maintenance. American ammunition abundance amplified this advantage, while German tank crews conserved their limited high-quality, armor-piercing shells for certain targets. Pershing crews could afford to engage any potential threat with full-power ammunition. The psychological impact on enemy morale was devastating. German positions that had previously been considered safe from American armor suddenly found themselves vulnerable to accurate, high-velocity fire from ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. 90mm guns' effectiveness extended beyond armor penetration to encompass the full spectrum of tank warfare. Its high-explosive shells could demolish fortified positions that had previously required artillery or air support to neutralize. White phosphorus rounds created fires that forced enemy troops from concealed positions, while canister ammunition turned the Pershing into a massive shotgun capable of clearing infantry from close-range defensive positions. Perhaps the most significant impact was on American crew morale. Tank crews, who had spent months fighting at a disadvantage, knowing that German armor could kill them at ranges where their own weapons were ineffective, suddenly found themselves equipped with superior firepower. The confidence that flowed from this transformation affected not just individual engagements, but the entire strategic balance along the Western Front. German intelligence services gradually recognized the threat posed by American heavy tanks, but their response capabilities were severely limited by material shortages and production bottlenecks. Efforts to deploy additional Tiger E's or modify existing tanks with thicker armor foundered on the reality of German industrial collapse. By March 1945, most German armored units operated with mixed collections of vehicles representing different production standards and equipment levels. Their combat effectiveness degraded by inconsistent spare parts supply and ammunition quality. The contrast with American capabilities could not have been more stark. Each Pershing that reached the front lines represented not just individual tank superiority, but systematic advantage in logistics, maintenance, and replacement capability. When a Pershing was damaged, American maintenance units could repair it using standardized parts manufactured in quantities that German planners found incomprehensible. When crews were lost, replacements arrived with training conducted on identical equipment using abundant ammunition supplies. The symbolic ammunition of this transformation was the K-ration, the cardboard box of processed food that represented American abundance too. German soldiers accustomed to ersatz coffee and black bread. Pershing crews consumed hot meals prepared by mobile field kitchens, while German tankers subsisted on reduced rations that reflected their nation's collapsing supply situation. The contrast extended beyond sustenance to encompass every aspect of military capability: fuel, spare parts, medical care, and replacement personnel. German tank crews who encountered Pershing tanks for the first time described a profound psychological shock. Veterans who had dominated European battlefields for 4 years suddenly found themselves outgunned by opponents they had previously dismissed as inferior. The realization that American industry had achieved not just parity but superiority in armored weapons fundamentally challenged assumptions about German technological leadership that had sustained Wehrmacht morale throughout the war's darkest periods. Oberleutnant Wilhelm Bartelberth, whose Panther was destroyed by Smoyer's Pershing at Cologne Cathedral, embodied this transformation. A veteran tank commander who had fought from France to the gates of Moscow, Bartelberth represented the elite of German armored forces. His destruction by a single American tank operated by a crew with minimal combat experience demonstrated that individual skill and tactical expertise could no longer compensate for technological disadvantage. The broader implications extended far beyond individual Tank engagements. As news of American heavy tank capabilities spread through German units, the psychological foundation of Wehrmacht resistance began to crumble. Soldiers who had maintained fighting spirit, despite overwhelming Allied numerical superiority, found it increasingly difficult to sustain morale when faced with evidence of American technological superiority as well. 90mm guns' impact resonated through every level of German command structure. Field commanders who had planned defensive operations based on German armored advantages found their calculations invalidated by American weapons that could penetrate their tanks at previously safe ranges. Corps and army commanders discovered that armored reserves they had positioned to conduct counterattacks could be destroyed by American forces before reaching their intended targets by April 1945. German resistance along the Western Front had collapsed into isolated pockets of fanatic defense, interspersed with wholesale surrender. The Pershing's contribution to this collapse extended beyond its direct combat effectiveness to encompass its role as a symbol of American industrial capability. German soldiers, who had sustained themselves through years of material privation with the belief that superior weapons would ultimately ensure victory, found that faith shattered by encounters with American equipment that exceeded their own capabilities. The true measure of the 90mm gun's impact lay not in statistics of armor penetration or kill ratios, but in its transformation of American strategic thinking. For the first time since entering the war, American armored forces possessed weapons that could engage any German tank on equal terms. This capability fundamentally altered the tactical and operational calculations that governed ground combat, allowing American commanders to employ their armored formations with confidence that had been impossible during the Sherman era. The ammunition that symbolized this transformation was the T-30 armor-piercing shell, a 24-pound projectile that represented the culmination of American metallurgical and ballistic science. Each shell carried not just explosive power, but the implicit promise of American industrial capacity, the guarantee that whatever was fired could be replaced, whatever was damaged could be repaired, whatever was lost could be rebuilt in quantities that German industry could no longer match. As spring turned towards summer in 1945, the few surviving German armored units found themselves fighting with weapons and equipment that had been rendered obsolete by American technological advancement. The Tiger and Panther tanks that had once terrorized Allied forces became targets for American armor that could destroy them at ranges exceeding 500 meters. The psychological tables had turned completely. German crews, who had once approached battle with confidence, now faced each engagement knowing they were outgunned as well as outnumbered. The final measure of this transformation came not in any single battle, but in the accumulation of encounters where German armor superiority proved to be myth rather than reality. Tank crews who had sustained German resistance through years of retreat discovered that their weapons could no longer guarantee survival, let alone victory. The Pershing and its 90mm gun had achieved something more significant than tactical advantage. They had destroyed the psychological foundation of German armored warfare in the rubble of German cities during those final weeks of war. Abandoned Panther and Tiger tanks bore silent testimony to the collapse of German technological supremacy. These vehicles, once symbols of Wehrmacht invincibility, had been reduced to static pillboxes by fuel shortages and mechanical breakdowns. Their crews, when they could be found, spoke of American tanks that seemed invulnerable, of shells that penetrated armor previously considered impenetrable, of an enemy that possessed not just superior numbers but superior weapons. The 90mm gun had accomplished something beyond its designer's wildest expectations. It had not merely provided American forces with effective anti-tank capability. It had fundamentally altered the psychological balance of armored warfare. German tankers, who had once approached battle confident in their equipment's superiority, now faced each engagement with the knowledge that American armor could kill them at ranges where they had previously felt secure. This Transformation extended beyond individual tank crews to encompass the entire German war effort. Soldiers who had sustained morale through years of defeat by believing in the superiority of German weapons found that faith shattered by encounters with American equipment that exceeded their own capabilities in every measurable parameter. The Pershing represented not just technological achievement, but the visible demonstration of American industrial capacity that German propaganda had consistently underestimated. Ultimate symbol of this reversal was the K-ration box, that humble container of processed food that American tank crews consumed daily while German soldiers survived on ersatz coffee and black bread. Inside each cardboard box lay evidence of American abundance: chocolate, cigarettes, canned meat, processed cheese, crackers that remained fresh after months of storage. To German eyes, these rations represented wealth beyond imagination, a society so prosperous that it could afford to feed its soldiers better than German civilians ate in peacetime. When German prisoners examined captured American equipment, they found the same abundance reflected in every component. Spare parts were plentiful and standardized. Ammunition was consistent in quality and available in quantities that seemed unlimited. Fuel flowed through supply lines that German forces could no longer disrupt effectively. The Pershing embodied this systematic advantage, not just a superior tank, but a superior tank supported by superior logistics, maintenance, and replacement capability. The psychological impact of this revelation proved as devastating as any tactical defeat. German soldiers who had maintained fighting spirit through years of material privation discovered that their sacrifices had not prevented American achievement of comprehensive superiority. The enemy they faced possessed not just more weapons, but better weapons supported by an industrial base that German forces could never hope to match or meaningfully damage. In the final analysis, the 90mm gun represented something more profound than technological advancement. It embodied the transformation of American industrial capability from quantity-focused mass production to quality-controlled precision manufacturing. The same factories that had produced thousands of adequate Sherman tanks had evolved to manufacture hundreds of superior Pershing tanks, each one capable of defeating any German armored vehicle in single combat. The ammunition that fed this transformation, the T-30, armor-piercing shell with its precisely calculated ballistic properties and reliable penetration characteristics, represented the culmination of American metallurgical science applied to military purposes. German tank crews who encountered these weapons discovered that their armor, previously considered proof against American fire, could be penetrated at ranges where their own guns remained effective. The psychological foundation of German armored tactics collapsed under the weight of this technological reversal as the war in Europe drew to its close. Abandoned German tanks littered the countryside from the Rhine to the Elbe. Many had been destroyed by American armor-firing 90mm shells that penetrated armor plating once considered invulnerable. Others had been abandoned by crews who recognized that further resistance was futile when faced with opponents who possessed superior weapons as well as overwhelming numbers. The sight of these abandoned vehicles, Panther and Tiger tanks that had once terrorized Allied forces, provided mute testimony to the collapse of German technological supremacy. True legacy of the 90mm gun extended far beyond its battlefield effectiveness. It represented the moment when American industrial capability achieved not just quantitative but qualitative superiority over German manufacturing. The same society that had been dismissed by German propaganda as culturally inferior had produced weapons that exceeded German engineering in every measurable parameter. This realization proved as devastating to German morale as any military defeat, undermining the psychological foundations that had sustained Wehrmacht resistance through years of strategic reverse. In the end, the mockery had turned to silence. German tankers who had once dismissed American armor as Tommy Cookers found themselves Facing opponents whose weapons could destroy any German tank at combat ranges, the 90mm gun had achieved something beyond tactical advantage. It had demonstrated that American abundance could be transformed into technical superiority, that mass production could be combined with precision engineering, that the society German propaganda had portrayed as materialistic and soulless could produce weapons of devastating effectiveness, the thunder that had echoed across European battlefields since 1940 was finally answered by an American voice that spoke with equal authority in the roar of the 90mm gun. German tankers heard not just the sound of superior weapons, but the voice of a civilization that had transformed its industrial might into military capability exceeding anything the Wehrmacht could produce or counter. The age of German armored supremacy had ended, replaced by American technological dominance that would reshape the balance of global power for generations to come. From the smoking ruins of Elsdorf to the rubble-strewn squares of Cologne, the evidence was unmistakable. The tables had turned. Decisively, where once German armor had dominated European battlefields through technological superiority, American forces now possessed weapons that could meet and defeat the Reich's finest tanks in direct combat. The 90mm gun had not merely evened the odds. It had tilted them decisively in favor of a nation that had learned to combine abundance with excellence, quantity with quality, industrial might with precision engineering. The K-ration box remained the perfect symbol of this transformation. Humble cardboard packaging that contained abundance undreamed of by German soldiers, representing a society so prosperous that it could afford to equip its warriors with both superior weapons and superior sustenance. In that contrast lay the ultimate explanation for German defeat. Not just the failure of arms, but the collision between scarcity and abundance, between desperate conservation and limitless production, between the dying gasps of European empire and the rising voice of American industrial democracy.